Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. On behalf of Universidad Austral and our partners, we want to give you a warm welcome to this seminar on Ukraine, Latin America, and the European Union, Geopolitics and Geoeconomics. My name is Sofía del Carril. I'm the executive director of our master's degree in international relations, and I also serve as director at our Center for Global Governance Studies, CEGG, for its acronym in Spanish. Established in 2023, CEGG is a space for critical discussion on global governance and from an interdisciplinary perspective. And our aim is to foster research and debates on global issues, including the world order, governance, and multilateralism. We also host a Jean Monnet module, an initiative aimed at studying the relationship between the European Union and Latin America and the Caribbean, with support of the EU. Before starting, I want to thank our team, Victoria, Santiago, Pamela, and especially Agostina Cavasoto, for putting together this event alongside our partners and for all their hard work. Ukraine stands as a critical challenge with far-reaching implications at both the regional and global levels. It touches upon fundamental questions regarding international law and the principles underpinning the post-World War II order, while also reshaping Europe's security architecture. Beyond these dimensions, it carries profound humanitarian, social, political, and economic consequences that extend across the region and reverberate through the world. We have a few minutes for the opening remarks, and in that sense, I would like to give the floor to Ambassador Yurii Klymenko, who is the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Ukraine to the Argentine Republic since 2023, and he also serves as accredited to the Republic of Paraguay and Uruguay. Ambassador Klymenko, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, the Prism Foreign Policy Council, as well as Universidad Austral, for this invitation and for organizing this very timely and essential event. I also would like to greet our distinguished colleagues, former ambassador of the Argentine Republic to Ukraine, and now Secretary General of CARI, Lila Roldán Vázquez, and the current ambassador of the Argentina to Ukraine, who will join us by video message. Well, let me begin by emphasizing that for Ukraine, the Latin American region has gained particular importance over the past few years, at least. This is not a symbolic or rhetorical shift. It is a well-defined political priority. Let me remind that in early 2024, the MFA of Ukraine developed for the first time in our history the strategy for the development of relations between Ukraine and the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, a 5-year strategic framework designed to elevate political, economic, trade, cultural, and humanitarian cooperation with the region. The strategy outlines key goals: securing stronger regional support for Ukraine in countering Russia's aggression, promoting the implementation of President Zelensky's peace formula, expanding trade and investment, supporting Ukrainian communities in the region, strengthening Ukraine's informational presence, countering Russian disinformation, and enhancing cultural outreach of Ukraine. Complementing this long strategic vision, Ukraine also adopted communication strategy for Ukraine, Latin America, and the Caribbean 2024-2026, which provides practical tools for deepening political, economic, cultural, and informational ties. Together, these documents reflect a simple but profound reality. Latin America matters for Ukraine, and we intend to invest time, diplomatic resources, and political energy in building these relationships. Why does this matter? Because Latin America is home to many countries whose democratic values resonate with those that Ukrainians defend every day. Countries that understand what sovereignty means. Countries that have themselves experienced historical struggles for freedom, dignity, and the rule of law. Countries in many of which there is a strong
Ambassador, your mic seems to be muted in the last part.
where have you lost me? And just because. Let me repeat maybe something what I said, because I find it is important.
Just the last part where you were talking about this shared history between Latin America and its past experiences. Just the last 20 seconds.
Okay. So I once again would like to reiterate the importance of Latin America to Ukraine, where also, among other things, there is a strong Ukrainian diaspora presence. Allow me to highlight in this context Argentina. Since President Milei took office, Argentina has shown a clear and principled stance in support of Ukraine. We appreciate this deeply. In particular, we are grateful for Argentina's backing of Ukrainian initiatives in the context of the Russian aggression in the UN and in the other international organizations, as well as Argentina's accession to some points of the Ukrainian peace formula. As Ukraine has been remaining fully committed to the idea of holding a Ukraine-Latin American summit. We view this format as a crucial platform for dialogue with the entire region, a space where we can speak directly about what is happening in Ukraine because of the Russian aggression, share the steps we are taking to achieve a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, and listen to the perspectives of Latin American partners. Our interest is not limited to explaining the Russian war or its consequences. We want to discuss opportunities, because the relationship between Ukraine and Latin America is much larger than only the warfare matters. We see real opportunities in trade and economic cooperation, advanced technologies, innovations, and large infrastructure projects realization, including energy ones, in particular the hydropower. Another very promising avenue of cooperation is possible participation of Latin American countries in rebuilding critical infrastructure and supporting post-war recovery of Ukraine. The annual Ukraine Recovery Conference is a concrete instrument for that. We already see interest from the region. This year, Argentina, for instance, was represented by the Secretary for International Economic Relations of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, International Trade and Worship, Fernando Brun, at the URC. As you know, in 2026, URC will be held in Poland, and we hope that governments and business communities from friendly countries across Latin America and Caribbean will join it. Our cooperation can also be fruitful in global food security. Ukraine's world's known export capacity, together with the agricultural strengths of some Latin American countries, can become a real stabilizing factor for world food markets. The annual Food from Ukraine summits are an open invitation to LAC partners to shape joint initiatives that will help feed vulnerable regions and prevent hunger from being used as a weapon. We also see important opportunities within the WTO, where Ukraine and Latin America countries can work together with the European Union to promote further liberalization of trade in goods and services. Ladies and gentlemen, Ukraine already holds the status of candidate for EU membership, which is a historic milestone. We hope that by 2030, Ukraine will become a full-fledged member of the European Union. And when it happens, our cooperation with Latin America region will also expand, since the EU already maintains a solid and structured framework of relations with Latin American countries, including through the EU CELAC summits. We believe that Ukraine can add value to this architecture, not only as a security partner, but also as a state capable of contributing innovative solutions, industrial cooperation, and post-war reconstruction opportunities. In this broader context, it is important to consider ongoing efforts related to Mercosur. There is a vast untapped potential in trade liberalization. When we talk about South American countries, the future free trade area between Mercosur and the European Union, which has been under negotiation for more than 20 years, if I'm not mistaken, would be a very effective mechanism to further liberalize trade flows. In the medium term, as Ukraine advances on its path towards the EU membership, this FTA could also become a tool to increase our trade flows with Mercosur member states. Let me also underline that Ukraine's cooperation with the LAC region, especially in the economic and technological field, is not an abstract one. In Latin America, Ukraine has already a positive reputation as a technologically capable country. I would like to remind inter alia that there are 14 Ukrainian turbines have been working successfully since early 80s at the Argentine-Uruguayan Salto Grande binational hydroelectric complex, a telling example of how our industrial heritage connects us, even when geography places us far apart. The world is changing rapidly. We have to recognize it. And in this changing environment, Ukraine believes in building partnerships based on trust, shared values, and mutual benefit. I am confident that the trilateral dimension we are discussing today, Ukraine, Latin America, and the European Union, has a real potential. Potential that can be translated into concrete results, new initiatives, new investments, and new opportunities. I also know that Argentina continues standing ready to support the organization of the Ukraine-Latin American Summit, as well as the EU does. And I sincerely hope that we'll continue to be active advocates of this initiative. For Ukraine, such support is extremely valuable. Let me conclude by saying that for Ukraine, the most of Latin America is a region of friendship, opportunity, and shared democratic vision. And I believe that Latin America is increasingly interested in Ukraine as well, and is ready to continue supporting Ukraine and even increase its support of Ukraine in its fight for freedom, for territorial integrity, for independence. And at the same time, Ukraine is not only a country which is defending itself, it is also a nation that is modernizing, reforming, deeply integrating into Europe, and preparing for a large-scale reconstruction. This creates opportunities for all our partners, including here in Latin America. I look forward to our continuing dialogue and cooperation for peace, for freedom, prosperity, and a more interconnected world grounded in a rules-based international order. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Klymenko, for these opening remarks. I would like now to share the words of Elena Mikusinski, our ambassador in Ukraine. I would like to ask Ivan to start broadcasting it. Ambassador Mikusinski couldn't be here today with us, but she sent us a broadcasted message. She is a career diplomat serving the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Argentina and stationed in Kyiv for the past few years. So we will now listen to her opening remarks.
Buenas tardes, good afternoon, dear Ambassador and Secretary General of the Argentine Council for International Relations, Mrs. Lila Roldán Vázquez, Ambassador Yurii Klymenko, Executive Director of Ukrainian Prism, Mr. Gerasymchuk, Director of the Center for Global Governance Studies, Universidad Austral, Mrs. Sofía del Carril, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor to address this panel, an exchange taking place at a decisive moment for Europe, Latin America, and the international order. On December 5th, we marked the 34th anniversary of Argentina's recognition of Ukraine's independence, the first country in Latin America to extend this formal acknowledgement, a milestone that underscores the depth and continuity of our bilateral engagement. Ukraine is heroically navigating one of the most challenging landscapes in its modern history. Yet, even in times of profound disruption, our bilateral relationship has remained active, constructive, and grounded in shared principles: respect for international law, the protection of civilians, and the defense of sovereignty. In the past year, Argentina was part of 2 working groups of the peace formula, and this year actively participates in the international coalition for the return of Ukrainian children, having signed the declaration and endorsed the UN resolution only a few days ago. My country also took part in the 2 major Ukraine reconstruction fora, in the first one in Berlin, and in this year, in 2025, in Rome, the only Latin American country represented at a high level. Nevertheless, the large-scale Russian invasion, and despite the continuous challenges a war of this magnitude entails, our bilateral projects and initiatives have pursued over the past 2 years. This reflects not only the resilience of our ties, but also our shared determination to preserve academic, cultural, and diplomatic cooperation under the most difficult circumstances. In the academic field, we reaffirm our willingness to strengthen research partnerships, joint study groups, and dialogue platforms capable of generating informed and forward-looking analysis. The role of universities and think tanks is essential in deepening our understanding of the transformations shaping the international system and in identifying new areas for cooperation. As we discussed today, the evolving geoeconomic and geopolitical dynamics linking Ukraine, Latin America, and the European Union, Argentina reiterates its commitment to a just and enduring peace for Ukraine, grounded in international law, and the full respect for its sovereignty and territorial integrity. We firmly believe that cooperation, political, academic, economic, and humanitarian, is essential for building a more stable and equitable global order. I wish you an enriching and productive exchange during this seminar. Thank you very much. Hasta luego.
But to close this section, we are now going to listen from Sergiy Gerasymchuk, Deputy Executive Director, Regional Initiatives and Neighborhood Program Director at the Foreign Policy Council Ukrainian Prism. He has worked for the Secretariat of the Parliament of Ukraine, in scientific research institutions under the President of Ukraine and under the Security and Defense Council of Ukraine. He holds degrees from Kyiv Mohila Academy and the Estonian School of Diplomacy. Sergiy, thank you for joining us today, and we'll listen to your remarks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this introduction. First and foremost, let me pass regards from our Executive Director, Mr. Gennady Maksak. Unfortunately, he is not able to come, but he asked me to greet all the participants of this event today. Also, let me start with the words of gratitude. The words of gratitude to the University of Austral and to the Centro of Global Governance for organizing today's panel and for continued partnership between our institutions. I do believe, we do believe that such partnerships are very important because they are resulting in creation of intellectual and expert platforms, and I would say even more intellectual and expert communities that connect Ukraine, Latin America, and the European Union. Also, to go on with the words of gratitude, I would like to express my true appreciation to both ambassadors for their ongoing cooperation and for the institutional support they provide to the expert communities in our countries, and to the cooperation, to extend cooperation within this triangle. Apart from it, I have to emphasize that the event is very topical because we are developing cooperation with Latin American countries. They become increasingly significant partners for Ukraine in a rapidly transforming global environment. And the ambassador has already mentioned many dimensions where our cooperation can be mutually beneficial and can bring significant results. Argentina can serve as a key facilitator for the triangle cooperation within Latin America, European Union, and Ukraine triangle, and can do contribute into stronger cooperation with multilateral formats such as the United Nations Organization, CELAC-EU, WTO, and others. My colleagues, both here in Ukraine and at our Brussels office of the Ukrainian Prism, do their best to serve as a platform, as an engine for the trilateral cooperation, for research and coordination, and we intend to remain hub open to everybody willing, both in Latin America, in Europe, in Ukraine, eager to cooperate, eager to extend cooperation, eager to contribute into research and development and promotion of the relations within this triangle. We have already made some steps in this direction. On November 25, 2024, we held an expert discussion titled Place for Ukraine in EU-Latin American Cooperation, New Content and Dynamics. And obviously, the recent years give a lot of impetus for the new dynamics. Also published the analytical study EU-Latin America Relations, Analyzing Cooperation from a Ukrainian Perspective, offering policy recommendations for Ukrainian and European policymakers. And we are really grateful to all the decision makers who considered our recommendations while developing the respective strategies and while promoting the respective relations. Ukrainian Prism is also expanding analytical cooperation with Latin America think tanks and universities, developing trilateral discussions, academic mobility, youth initiatives, expert exchanges, and joint public events. And indeed, I'm really delighted to say that my colleagues had a chance to visit a few Latin American countries already this year. And we intend to continue with these efforts, because building bridges over the ocean, it's not an easy task, but there is still a necessity to build such bridges between expert communities, between university communities, and I'm happy that we are the part of this process. We are pleased to cooperate not only with the University of Austral, but also CEGG, but we do appreciate also the cooperation with the Council of International Relations of Argentina, with special thanks to Lila, Roldán, Vázquez, who is supporting this initiative. And we do believe that institutionalizing regular consultations and trilateral dialogues with the EU would significantly strengthen strategic cooperation and coordination. So I do welcome all the participants. I do hope that this event today, this conversation today, will be a step towards deeper cooperation, joint analytical projects, academic cooperation, youth programs, and public diplomacy initiatives. And I do hope that the dialogue between Ukraine, Latin America, and the EU is of a long-term nature. And my organization, Ukrainian Prism, is always open to sustained and strategic partnerships. Many, many thanks.
Thank you, Sergiy, and thank you, everyone, for your opening remarks. We will now move on to the next section of the seminar, and I would like to introduce you to Ambassador Lila Roldán Vázquez. She served as Argentina's ambassador to the Republic of Ukraine between 2007 and 2015. She now serves as Secretary General of the Argentine Council on Foreign Relations, where she also is in charge of the Committee on Eurasian Affairs. Thank you, Lila, for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
My pleasure, Sofía. Thank you so much. First of all, let me thank the organizers for inviting me to join you on this very interesting and I hope fruitful meeting. And among our distinguished participants, I would like to stress that we are joined also by Gonzalo Pérez del Castillo, who is president of our sister organization in Uruguay, the Uruguayan Council for International Relations. So welcome, Gonzalo, and everybody. It's a pleasure to see you all. First of all, I have to say that I share absolutely the initial remarks that Sofía del Carril made for us with her description of this unfounded and brutal aggression from the Russian Federation on Ukraine, not only since 2022, but since 2014, with the annexation of the Crimean Peninsula and the support to forces against the Ukrainian government in the Donbass region of Ukraine. And I also agree that this war is not only a war on Ukraine, but it's a war on all the principles of international law, of the world order as we knew it, based on the United Nations Charter and other international organizations. It's and even if we are very far away as a region, we are not exempt of its consequences. I'm going to focus on the Latin American countries and the Caribbean countries' relation with Ukraine vis-a-vis the Russian war, since I expect other colleagues to touch on the European Union dimension. So, in the first place, we should notice that the disparity of regimes and political orientations of the Latin American and Caribbean countries, our governments, better said, does not facilitate a common or concerted reactions to the Russian war on Ukraine. The polarization and consequent lack of political agreement that have characterized our region for the last 20 years or more have had a negative impact on multilateral, regional, and international organizations. It's been an obstacle to the appropriate defense of our common interests in the region, and also weakened the image and the position of Latin America and the Caribbean countries on the international scene. Having said that, regarding the Russian war on Ukraine, the interaction of traditional Latin American and Caribbean non-alignment and the different relations between individual Latin American and Caribbean countries and Russia and the United States, we can see there are three more or less distinct camps. Countries openly supporting Ukraine, like Argentina, Chile, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Paraguay, and Uruguay. Countries openly supporting Russia, which are the fewest, of course, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and to a certain extent also Bolivia, and others which are in the middle camp, most notably Brazil, Colombia, Mexico. And this middle category of countries seem to pursue policies of fence-sitting or hedging in response to the rise of a new and multipolar world. This situation was clearly reflected both on the public declarations of the leaders of our region and also in the votes on the issue within the United Nations, where some countries condemned the Russian aggression and others abstained or justified it. This could be part of one of the foreseeable consequences of Russia's war on Ukraine, which is the return of spheres of influence around the world, and which would mean also the abandonment of the non-alignment policy to which the region traditionally adhered. Nevertheless, the great majority of countries in the region defends Ukraine's right to sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity, and condemns the Russian Federation aggression dating from 2014. On the same day of the Russian full-fledged aggression, on February 24th in 2022, the Organization of American States, OAS, issued a statement in which it condemned the Russian Federation's invasion of Ukraine and called for an immediate cessation of hostilities. Then defined the Russian aggression against the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine as a crime against international peace and a very serious act in violation of international law. A few days later, or months later, in March 2022, the OAS approved another resolution called the Crisis in Ukraine, which demanded respect for human rights and the immediate cessation of hostilities and acts that could constitute war crimes in Ukraine. And recall that America is a zone of peace based on respect for the principles and provisions of international law. This text was approved of 28 members of OAS out of 34 active members. None against the resolution and only 5 abstained. Brazil, Bolivia, El Salvador, Honduras, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Nicaragua was absent. Brazil, we have to say that Brazil, Bolivia, and Honduras abstained, but they explained that they were not against the text of the resolution, but against the discussion of the subject in the OAS. And finally, on April, the same year, 2022, the OAS directly suspended the Russian Federation as an observer to the organization until, of course, the country ceases its hostilities, withdraws the forces within and recognizes Ukraine's international borders. Afterwards, following President Zelensky's participation in President Milei's inauguration in December 2023, Argentina has, as the ambassadors have mentioned already, has joined the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, an alliance that coordinates military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. And it is the first and only Latin American country to join this group, also known as the Rammstein Group, because it usually meets in Rammstein in Germany. Argentina is also formally supporting the international efforts for the return of Ukrainian children abducted by Russia, which is one of the worst crimes that the Russian Federation is committing against Ukraine, and for which President Putin and the Commissioner on the Rights of Children of the Russian Federation, Maria Lvova-Belova, have warrants of arrest from the International Criminal Court. So this President Milei and President Boris from Chile participated in the summit on peace in Ukraine in Switzerland last year. And as was already mentioned, Argentina is participating in groups, working groups on points of the peace plan that President Zelensky presented to the international community. And is also, of course, joining the declarations on this platform for the return of children. In the votes held in the United Nations, and first condemning the Russian Federation for its aggression against a neighboring country, and the second on humanitarian nature, 4 countries in the region abstained. They didn't vote against, but abstained. And they were Bolivia, Cuba, El Salvador, and Nicaragua. Venezuela was absent in both votes, and Dominica also was absent in the second one. In the same sphere, Bolivia, Cuba, and Nicaragua voted against the General Assembly resolution suspending the participation of Russia in the UN Human Rights Council, and various countries of the region voted in abstention: Barbados, Belize, Brazil, El Salvador, Guyana, Mexico, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago. And then our votes were even more divided when the General Assembly, United Nations General Assembly, decided to suspend Russia from the Human Rights Council for all the accusations that it had of serious violations of human rights committed in Ukraine. Most of our governments, 18 of them, voted in favor of this separation. 3 voted against, Bolivia, Cuba, Nicaragua, and 9 abstained. But in very few days ago, on December the 3rd, there was another resolution voted in the General Assembly concerning the situation and the return of abducted children. And there was in overwhelming support of the Latin American region for this resolution. Among the Latin American and Caribbean countries, only Cuba and Nicaragua voted against it, and other countries abstained or were absent. But I think that on the whole, the situation in Latin America and the Caribbean can also be seen from the point of view of historical relations and traditions. We know that Russia has a kind of romantic influence in some sectors of the society in Latin America, as being a champion of communism in an era, and then against the power of the United States during the Cold War. But the relations of Russia with Latin America are not so important from the point of view of economic relations or investment relations. I mean, it's mostly a kind of ideological influence in some sectors of the population and of propaganda, because it's with Russia today is RT in Spanish. It reaches various countries in the region. And of course, the Ukraine capability is not so extended in Latin America yet. Though Ukraine has approved a communication strategy for Latin America, following an experience that preceded on the African continent. And I think that this is going to be very fruitful, because we share common values. We defend territorial integrity, independence of the countries, sovereignty of the countries. We oppose violence. We oppose war. We are a region of peace. And we have received, and they live among us as nationals of our countries, almost 1 million Ukrainian people, mostly divided between Brazil and Argentina, but there are also Ukrainian descendants from Ukrainian roots in other countries in the region. And they are very well integrated to the countries. So I think we don't have not only an obligation, a moral obligation from the point of view of international law to defend this, the right of Ukraine to defend itself and to recover the territories occupied by Russia and to follow the politics that the country understands as the right ones for the country, as belonging to the European Union or whatever organization Ukraine decides to join. That's their right, the Ukrainians' right. And it's also because we need to defend international law. Because for countries like ours in Latin America, which are middle countries and we're not great powers, we need international law to protect our rights. And in that, we are in the same situation as Ukraine, not in the same situation of a war, of course, but in the situation of needing the assistance of other countries to respect our borders and our way of life. So hoping that we were going to be able to help Ukraine in this stance and develop very productive relations when Ukraine returns to peace. I'm open to questions afterwards. Slava Ukraina.
Thank you, Lila. Now, Ivan Fechko, we will listen from Ivan. She is a senior analyst in Latin America at the Foreign Policy Council, Ukrainian Prism, and he's specializing in the intersection of Ukraine's foreign policy and Latin American affairs. Ivan?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. First of all, let me sincerely thank again Global Government Center from Universidad Austral and personally Sofía del Carril for the initiative. And also my gratitude goes to Agostina Cavasoto, whose research on Argentina-Ukraine relations has truly become a bridge that made this cooperation possible. And I'm also very grateful to Lila, Roldán, Vázquez for moderating our discussion today. Last December, together with CARI, Ukrainian Prism organized a roundtable about Ukrainian Argentina relations, and I'm glad that meetings like this are becoming a good shared tradition between our institutions. And in this panel, I would like to present a Ukrainian perspective on the Ukraine-EU-Latin America triangle of cooperation. First of all, why this triangle matters, especially after 2022. As we know, Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine has transformed the global context and made the Ukraine-EU-Latin America triangle strategically relevant. The war triggered debates on sanctions, energy and food security, and the future of the international order when a state openly violates the UN Charter. For Ukraine, this moment coincided with a shift toward a more multi-vector foreign policy and intensified diplomatic engagement across Latin America. As an official EU candidate and a country defending European security, Ukraine now sees Latin America not as a distant region, but as an essential partner for ensuring sovereignty, resilience, and international rule-based cooperation. Trilateral cooperation is therefore important both geopolitically and practically. Ukraine is opening 4 new embassies in Uruguay, Ecuador, the Dominican Republic, and Panama, even under wartime and financial constraints, showing long-term commitment to the region. To maximize impact, Europe and Ukraine should jointly deepen their presence and work with Latin American governments, including those without embassies in Kyiv. Such cooperation strengthens shared subjectivity on the global stage and supports common values, respect for international law, responsible nuclear and climate policy, and coordinated responses to evolving security and economic threats. One of the key arguments is that security and sovereignty are not purely European topics. They are equally important for Latin America and for Ukraine, especially at a time when global hegemons test the limits of international law in their competition for influence. A fresh case published yesterday by the New York Times illustrates this very clearly. According to this article, Russia has significantly expanded its covert intelligence operations in Latin America, using, for example, Mexico in that case as a major platform. More than 20 Russian intelligence officers reportedly operated there under diplomatic cover, and similar networks have been exposed also in Brazil and Argentina. Russian embassies across the region have consistently served as operational hubs for intelligence exchanges and broader influence activities. This is not an isolated episode. It shows that Russian activity in the region is systematic and strategic, ranging from classic intelligence work to disinformation, media influence, and contacts with radical political actors. And for Ukraine, this is directly linked to the war. Many narratives that weaken support for Ukraine or normalize Russian aggression are being promoted through these networks. But it is also a challenge for Latin American and European security and for the wider transatlantic community. These examples demonstrate that Russian intelligence and influence activity in Latin America is not episodic, it is structural. It therefore requires coordinated countermeasures in a Ukraine, Latin America, EU trilateral format, combining elements of intelligence and law enforcement cooperation where possible, common initiatives on information security and cyber resilience, and coordinated diplomatic engagement, defending the basic principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and non-use of force. These values are important for the EU, for Latin America, and for Ukraine alike. And they become even more important when major powers in other regions, including the United States and China, enter into increasingly open geopolitical confrontation and sometimes put these very principles under pressure in pursuit of their own dominance. Precisely in such a context, medium-sized democracies need to stand together. The second big dimension is geoeconomics. After 2022, the EU had to rethink its dependence on Russian energy. This opened a window for closer cooperation with Latin America on critical raw materials, green transition, and diversification of supply chains. Latin America is extremely well positioned here. It has lithium, copper, rare earths, but also enormous potential in renewable energy and green hydrogen. The EU's global gateway projects in Chile, Brazil, or Argentina and elsewhere are an important step, but they will only succeed if they are seen as mutually beneficial. Ukraine can play a useful role in this triangle. We are simultaneously a country at war, defending European security, a future EU member state in need of reconstruction, and a major agriculture producer and potential hub for green technologies and digital solutions. Ukraine can act as a bridge linking European investment, Ukrainian reconstruction, and Latin American capacities, including the participation of Latin American companies in rebuilding infrastructure and cooperation on sustainable agriculture, digital public services, and educational technologies. The war has shown how environmental, social, and security challenges are inseparable, from ecocide and agriculture disruption to mass displacement, making green reconstruction and climate security diplomacy not only vital for Ukraine, but also relevant for Latin Americans' own environmental vulnerabilities. Likewise, Ukraine's grain exports are essential for global food security, and coordinated diplomatic efforts by Ukraine, the EU, and Latin America within platforms such as the UN, FAO, or WTO are needed to protect rule-based trade and prevent food from being instrumentalized as a weapon. A fourth, often underestimated dimension of this triangle is education, science, and knowledge exchange. If we want a sustainable partnership between Ukraine, the EU, and Latin America, we need people, students, researchers, journalists, policymakers who understand each other's realities from the inside, not only second-hand narratives. We already have inspiring examples. Recently, Dr. Angelica Vázquez from Colombia defended her PhD at the University of Cadiz in Spain with a Ukrainian scholar as one of her supervisors and with a dissertation focused on the Holodomor, the man-made famine, a genocide orchestrated by the Soviet regime. This is much more than individual story. It shows how Latin American and European academia can jointly study Ukrainian history, including the darkest chapter, and thus contribute to a more accurate understanding of our regions. For a long time, perceptions of Ukraine in many Latin American countries were shaped through the lens of Russian studies. Today, we need to change that. We need to develop Latin American studies in Ukraine so that we have experts who understand the region directly, and at the same time build Ukrainian studies in Latin America so that future diplomats, journalists, and scholars here see Ukraine as a distinct country with its own history, culture, and modern technological experience. In this context, we are working on an initiative supported by the First Lady of Ukraine, Elena, the Global Coalition of Ukrainian Studies. It aims to unite universities around the world that are ready to study Ukraine or about Ukraine, its language, culture, but also very practical lessons of resilience, digital transformation, and post-war recovery. Leading universities of the world, such as Cambridge or Harvard, are already involved in this network, and taking this opportunity, I would like to invite our colleagues from Argentina, from the wider Latin American region to join this global coalition and to consider creating or strengthening Ukrainian studies programs in their institutions. In parallel, we in Ukraine are interested in expanding Latin American studies, including cooperation with universities here for joint curricula, mobility, like, for example, Erasmus, or research projects. Promoting academic mobility, joint supervision of theses, exchange semesters, and visiting lectureship is absolutely essential. When young people from Buenos Aires, Kyiv, Warsaw, or Brazil spend a semester in each other university, they not only gain knowledge, they build human connection that no geopolitical crisis can easily destroy. A stable and structured political dialogue within the Ukraine, EU, Latin America triangle is essential for effective global governments. It is important that Ukraine be included in formats such as the EU CELAC summits and related trilateral platforms, just as Latin American partners are welcome in initiatives led by Ukraine, including the Crimean platform, the Coalition for the Return of Ukrainian Children, and broader UN-based efforts on human rights, food security, climate, and poverty reduction. Working together across such platforms at the level of diplomats, parliamentarians, and policymakers would help align positions, increase mutual understanding, and ensure that political cooperation becomes systematic rather than episodic, creating long-term benefits for all the regions. Let me finish with a few very concrete ideas that came from our recommendations and from the work we are already doing. First of all, institutionalize the triangle. For example, create a regular Ukraine, EU, Latin American track dialogue, bringing together diplomats, parliamentarians, and experts. Each meeting could focus on one theme: human rights, digital transformation, critical raw materials, climate security, or countering disinformation, with one region in the lead. Use reconstruction as a platform. Develop a tripartite working group on Ukraine's reconstruction, inviting Latin American companies, development banks, and universities to participate in projects in energy, housing, infrastructure, education, and green transition. It's also very important, as we already mentioned, invest in education and knowledge, expand academic mobility and joint programs, for example, by linking the Global Coalition of Ukrainian Studies with Latin American universities. Support joint research on topics like transition justice, post-conflict reconstruction, and democratic resilience. Next is coordinate on reforming international institutions. EU, Latin America, and Ukraine have shared interest in reforming the UN system, defending the UN Charter, and ensuring that medium-sized democracies are not marginalized in a world dominated by a few competing hegemons. And finally, strengthen regular expert collaboration between think tanks, universities, diplomatic schools, and analytical centers from Ukraine, Latin America, and the EU, just as we are doing today. Such cooperation can form a permanent dialogue platform for dialogue, joint forecasting, policy analysis, and the design of practical cooperation mechanisms in areas ranging from energy, digital economy to security, green transition, and post-war construction. To conclude, when we speak about the Ukraine-EU-Latin America triangle, we are not speaking about a purely geopolitical game of influence. We are speaking about a community of states and societies that, despite all difference, share a basic belief in sovereignty, human rights, and the rule of law. In a world where these principles are under pressure from Russia aggression, from authoritarian populism, and from great power rivalry, it is more important than ever that we stand together in security, in geoeconomics, in education, and in values. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ivan, for your words. Very interesting listening to your perspective. I would like to invite everyone to make questions through the chat. Recibimos preguntas a través del chat en castellano, también en inglés, así que si les surge alguna duda para algún expositor, no dejen de poner la pregunta en el chat, después la podemos traducir. That being said, we are now crossing the border briefly to Poland to listen to Bartłomiej Znojek. He is a Latin America analyst at the Polish Institute of International Affairs. There, he specializes on political and economic affairs in Latin America, the European Union, and Poland's overall relations with their Latin American partners. Bartłomiej, thank you for joining us, and we will listen to you carefully.
Thank you, Sofía, and generally thank you for inviting me to this conference and give the privilege to share the virtual floor with such distinguished speakers. I was asked to share some reflections on the European Union perspective and in particular about its evolving approach to Latin America. And I will do that by referring to two latest summits between the European Union and CELAC, the Community of Latin American Caribbean countries, to show how they interlink with the changing global context that involves Ukraine. And at the end, I'm going to share a few comments on Poland. So let's go back to 2023 when the first EU-CELAC summit after a long hiatus took place. That year, the dialogue was strongly influenced by differences in approach to Russia and its war against Ukraine, among other issues. Since then, this protocol of differences has widened because in October 2023, we had Hamas attack on Israel, and then on long Israel military operation in Gaza that influenced positions in both regions. And new, and maybe even more significant variable we have from the perspective of EU and CELAC relations in Ukraine was the return of Donald Trump to presidency of the United States in January. Some in the European Union were trying to view this change in the United States as an opportunity. For example, the prospect of increased protectionism by the US and the implementation of this policy by Donald Trump's administration have accelerated the process of concluding the EU negotiations with Mercosur and the European Commission's decision to launch the ratification of this agreement in early September. I talked to experts in Brussels and they clearly said, without Trump, we wouldn't have this process advanced to this moment. But the reality began much more severe. This brings me to the last summit, which took place exactly 1 month ago in Colombia, in Santa Marta. Despite adverse global processes, a robust process of multi-level consultations and meetings preceded the meeting. I personally had a chance to participate in some public and non-public debates leading to the summits. And in ideal terms, it would be just the next big step in the process of revival of the strategic bi-regional partnership, but the actual outcome wasn't so optimistic. There was low presence of leaders, especially from the European side, and the differences were much visible, not exacerbated by the positions on Russia or Israel, but arguably on the relations with the United States and maybe even fears of retaliation from the Trump administration. While at the summit in Santa Marta, discussions circled around the defense of multilateralism, green and digital transition and trade, as well as social cohesion, the final declaration was dominated by the references to the US actions in the Caribbean, defense of territorial integrity, opposition to the use of force, to breaching international law and fighting criminal groups. There was no mention of the EU-Mercosur agreement or the EU-Mexico new agreement that also takes place, of which the ratification also takes place. For the European Union and CELAC countries, the current context poses a number of threats. Among other things, it encourages polarization of attitudes, including, for example, on the vision on how the global order should be shaped and what partners should be the choice of key partners. This has broad consequences, as the functioning of a rules-based order is crucial from the perspective of the European Union, Latin America, and Ukraine alike. Fast forward to the present days, and situation has become far more alarming. We are meeting just a few days after the Trump administration openly confirmed in the recent national security strategy, it has revived Monroe Doctrine, what means it views Americas as its zone of influence, that it wants to exert a broad control over the region and push out competitors. Those who follow Latin America will say that Trump administration clearly talks about China in first place. But if you read this and the assessment on the decline of Europe, you see the European Union fits into the US definition of a competitor in the region. And let's call a spade a spade. What the US does, maybe in the Caribbean and Latin America, should be called Putin's imperialism or a bull. And we should be feared of it because it impacts the future of Europe, including Poland and Ukraine, and the way we can tackle the danger of the more expansionist, more reckless, and self-assured Russia. I'm sure most in Poland and Ukraine are clear that Russia will not stop if it's not defeated. And importantly, a free, modern Ukraine is the greatest danger for the continuity of the Russian regime of Putin. I would like to close my speech with a few thoughts regarding the Polish perspective, and I know there are some points of similarities, some aspirations from the Ukraine. Latin America has long had marginal importance in the Polish foreign policy. There is a focus on big countries, big economies, and also on those countries where we have bigger cultural ties, especially large number of Argentines and Brazilian nationals with Polish ancestors, Polish roots. Since joining the EU, for Poland, there were many opportunities for greater relations with Latin American partners, especially trade agreements and other tools, but not necessarily they served as a boost to intensify relations with them. I would say that there were few sparks that changed that approach. And the first one was the global financial crisis in 2008. There was a conviction in Poland that we need to look for other partners than European Union because we need to diversify our relations. And I saw greater interest in some big and attractive Latin American partners. The second moment, I would argue, was awakening for Poland, was the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And that change consisted in seeing that Ukraine realized that without a good dialogue with so-called global South partners, it's really difficult to get through with their position and to explain the policies and the case, the stakes which are related to the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And that showed that it's important to reach out to distant partners in the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. My sense is that this interest in Poland has visibly risen because of Ukraine, the sense of the importance of closer relations with global South. My personal opinion is not in that sense is that maybe in Poland, Asia and Africa attracts more attention than Latin America, but there is a visible change, visible progress in seeing Latin America as an important and prospective region for Polish business, for example. The great challenge, which should be treated seriously, is that I think that Poland or Ukraine are seen in Latin America through lenses of countries without agency, that we are dependent, we don't have our own position, and we are controlled by United States or other countries. We are not self-assured countries, and this is a challenge. We should work, both Poland and Ukraine, that we are countries with our foreign policies, our choices. This requires engagement and more robust political dialogue, as well as robust contacts between expert communities, academia, think tanks. This is something I see in case of my colleagues from Ukraine who try to reach out to their partners in various countries in Latin America. And I can share one story. At the beginning of this phase of war of Russia against Ukraine, we had a visit of a guest from Ukraine who was talking about interest in his country in close relations with expert communities outside Europe. And he mentioned something like that. We had proposal from United States or United Kingdom of mediating contacts with think tanks in Latin America. But we said no, like we want to do it directly. And I think it's really important that there is a direct contact and there is a direct transfer of positions and explanations. What are stakes and what is the meaning of our approach? Going back to Poland, the last thought, when I'm thinking in strategic terms, in long-term perspective, I believe that the process of strengthening Poland's international position, including its status as a leading member of the European Union, closer relations with partners in Latin America are indispensable. And I believe that Ukraine, seeing its potential prospective entry into European Union, also will see this as a way of strengthening its position. And I would really wish Ukraine to reach these goals, and especially to live in a peace and safety and freedoms. Thank you for this time.
Thank you, Bartolomew, for your insights. We will now introduce Dr. Wiktoria Wojciechowska, professor at the Lviv Polytechnic National University, the Jagiellonian University, and the University of Turin. She has taken part in numerous international projects, including Erasmus+, PRIN, Horizon Europe. She specializes in development studies, energy security, inequality, and circular economy. She will give us another perspective. We thank Dr. Wiktoria for joining us today, and we give you the floor. I see her connected, but maybe she's listening.
Yes,
yes.
Okay, connected. Yeah. I would like to ask Agostina to do the presentation, if possible, and I will speak as I just arrived to Krakow for my trip further. And yes, and in Ukraine is especially Lviv, like even Lviv is in a tough situation with electricity. Like 3 hours we have electricity, 7 we don't, after recent Russian attack. And I wish what has been told by Professor Bartolomew before, that we finally get some peace. I don't see the. Can you share the presentation, Agostina? Or
I am having some trouble sharing it, but I have sent it to the moderator.
If it's an issue, I simply can. You mean I can share?
Oh, what? Let's see.
Yo ahí la estoy descargando.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, yes.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I'm sorry. Zoom isn't giving me the option as far as I can see, which is weird.
That is okay. I probably start to speak, and yeah, I'm just coming also from another meeting because we got some great news that the Horizon Europe project related to the circular economy with the University of Bedfordshire, but with a huge network also from Italy. Poland has passed the first round, and we are now to submit the full proposal. But today I'm going to share the information, the presentation about the strategic realignment of development aid to Ukraine, especially after the full-scale invasion of Russia in February 2022. I will speak about concrete projects and about the geopolitical shift, of course, the US withdrawing, and that other countries are stepping in when it comes to the development aid. So yes, indeed, the aid shifted from the humanitarian and the economic democratic reforms focus towards more strategic, resilience and security oriented. And the key question here would be how the next one, how the aid has changed post 2014. Yeah, next, can you? Because the slides, next, yes. Like whereas there is 8 priorities for the foreign donors, post 2014 focus and post 2022 shift. And so definitely to summarize, because the first stage of Russian aggression in Ukraine happened after the invasion of Crimea and in its annexation, and in 2014 the development aid has focused on humanitarian relief and emergency response, while trying to stabilize economic and social welfare of the country. Also to support democratic reforms, so Ukraine would tend more to the European Union and not to Russia. And there were numerous important strategic programs, such as agricultural, democratic transformation, civil society support, and of course the support of EU vector development. And the development aid flows were quite fragmented, and especially when it comes to bilateral aid. So the most tremendous shift happened after February 2022. When EU actually faced with strategic issues when it comes to post-war resilience and supporting strengthening institutional reforms, long-term recovery, and of course the EU accession alignment. Therefore, the major focus was not on the let's say the democratic transformations, but rather toward the crisis management, and that of course bringing together the defense, development and democracy. The next one, the territorial changes in Ukraine. The next slide. Territorial changes in Ukraine, as I mentioned before, Ukraine Ukraine faced the annexation of Crimea in 2014, and for the time being, there are about 20% of the territory occupied by Russia, where Russia basically takes each month some kilometers, despite all our resistance, and therefore the Ukrainian society is incredibly fragmented. So there are like 7 million internally displaced people. There are 2 million people still living on the occupied territories. There are people, 1 million of soldiers fighting at the front, and about 6 million people went abroad, and of course the civil population, about up to 10 million, who are working and trying to live a normal life as is possible in current conditions. The next one. The government support to Ukraine by months according to the Kiel Institute. The comparative table are United States and Europe. And unfortunately, since the President Trump came to the power in the United States, as you know, that many projects, were first on hold and later on completely removed, such as US aid and many others. And so currently, in military terms and in development in terms of military aid, humanitarian, and other type of aid, the US has practically withdrawn from Ukraine. The next one. The largest assistant, the largest support is given by European Union, both financial and military. At the beginning of the war, it was the United States, but not anymore. So this is more of a past. Could you next one of a past, let's say, the government support to Ukraine by country group. Yes, as well here, a big difference that Europe and the US, so even before, Europe was much more involved in Ukrainian issues. And next one, so the research objectives here would be to analyze a dual role in Ukraine. In rebuilding institutions plus resisting Russian influence, as well as proposing, as a previous speaker said, that the Ukrainian a different aid architecture that would actually consider Ukrainian agency to rebuild Ukraine. Next one. So when we analyze the literature, we have the traditional paradigm of aid, which would be north-south. And Ukraine is even sometimes not considered a case for the development studies, since it's different. It's East-West security frontier, and therefore an integrated framework would be needed for Ukraine. Next one. So basically, the aid post 2022 has shifted into being more instrumental and securitized. So it's not anymore just to support democratic transformation reforms, but it has a goal to rebuild state institutions, and of course on the basis of European values, which would be transparent and democratic, but as well to support energy security and green transition, to align with EU, NATO, of course, norms, and at the same time to resist influence and propaganda from Russia. Yes, the next one. As you know, we have several consensuses. We have Washington consensus that Argentina has experienced, yes, in the 80s, 90s, and Washington consensus that is more oriented on on the market, on the fiscal discipline and taxation, is not a good fit for Ukraine, as well as Seoul consensus that has emerged in 2010 and is, of course, grows first, state control and participation. So while Washington consensus was more free markets, and Seoul consensus is striving more for development, growth, state involvement, and so on. European consensus includes is already much closer when it comes to social inclusion and well-being priorities. However, Ukraine would need a hybrid approach that would also take into account the needs of Ukraine for its both resilience and post-war recovery, and that would be kind of a hybrid. So it would consider different angles and the different factors that Ukraine is facing for the time being. And next one, so the strategic, when it comes to strategic programs in the European Union, of course, first comes to mind that the largest one, the EU-Ukraine facility. Of course, it's big in terms of time and in terms of money. It's 50 billion euros project. Of course, this project targets the development, the support of state budget, and the stimulation of investment, as well as giving technical support for the implementation of those programs. And the key areas would be key priority areas for Ukraine, that are energy, transport and export logistics, agri-food, critical raw materials, ITC sector, green transition, and environmental protection. And so, yes, therefore, we have probably more projects and more aspects. I don't know if we have time to share. I will summarize simply that they target main areas for Ukrainian development, and before 2022 they were less instrumental, but after 2022 aid becomes an instrument for support and for support of not only democratic transformation, but of resilience, security, and sovereignty of Ukraine. And the next one, I would like also to speak about another donor. Next one, next slide. It's Japan, and Japan is number one support of Ukraine, even if we know that Japanese aid, Japan is not giving military support. However, Japan is supporting the mining of mine territories of Ukraine, as well as gives financial support to the government, to the energy security sector. There is also a large number of private donations, and Japan, also supports agricultural sector and energy security transformation and transition. Next one. To summarize, what the next one, what Ukraine needs, that would be to strengthen recipient agency. Therefore, Ukraine should co-design the priorities according to its needs, and communicate them effectively to the donor agency. Ukraine should enhance transparency because we are all aware of corruption, and we should build trust both with donors and within civil society. And of course, to foster and to have better multilateral coordination, so we don't overlap with when it comes to donors. Next one. So what is currently Ukrainian government doing? Ukrainian government is having a strategy, win-win, means innovation strategy to win the peace, Ukraine 2030. Ukraine would like to become an innovation hub by 2030. Yes, therefore, a lot of investments are going in the area of ICT, IE, and of course, another area would be sustainable development and security and digital transformation. There are numerous other initiatives. That next one. Yes, initiatives mainly from the European Union, but also from Japan to both to help the civil society to resist the current aggression, but as well to look forward and to have something to build on. And in the conclusion, I would like to say that the transformation challenge for Ukraine it would be for when it comes to post-war recovery, but also resilience during war, requires concentration of efforts and collaboration from international community, the government of Ukraine, civil society, and the private sector in order to align for better national, let's say, for better to win the war and to create, let's say, an aid architecture that would suit the unique Ukrainian needs and would be beneficial for Ukrainian society. So I guess I spoke quite a long. I am, of course, thank you for your attention, and I welcome questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria, for your presentation and for sharing with us this perspective regarding the aid and reconstruction. We have a couple of very interesting questions in the chat. And I think maybe what I can do is read them out loud and invite our speakers, Ambassador Klymenko, Ambassador Roldán, Vázquez, Sergiy, Ivan, Bartolomé, and of course Victoria to jump in if they think they have a good answer to them. So we have questions regarding security, education, and cultural exchanges, the new stance of the US and energy cooperation. So really different topics between them. And so I'd like to sort of build up on the first two questions that we have. Aleli is asking, what lessons do we think the international security system can learn from this conflict and how to prevent similar crisis? And in that sense, I would like to tie that to the other question that has to do with the Trump administration, and particularly the new Trump administration. How do you think the new position of the United States regarding the war in Ukraine is sort of shaping this international security architecture? Anyone would like to jump in? No one.
I may say, Yeah, I may speak from the Ukrainian perspective. It's perceived very badly, the Trump plan for peace for Ukraine, and that we have to give up the territories, and both the president as well as the civil population, and nobody agrees with that, and it's simply different alignment. United States are now aligned with Russia, and it's not. I mean, for Ukraine and for Europe is really it doesn't look good at all, and so from Ukrainian perspective, it's bad. It's very bad.
Thank you, Ambassador Klymenko.
Thank you. Thank you. Some contributions on my part to the questions which were raised about the lessons learned as a result of this full-scale Russian invasion. It's the first lesson we have to. In my opinion, we have to make, and is very relevant, I think, not only to Ukraine, is not relevant to the European Union, is not relevant only to Europe as a region, but to the entire world, that unfortunately, as this Russian aggression, which started in 2014, against Ukraine, shown that the international security system is vulnerable. So the international rules-based system, as was created, and we thought that it was effective. Unfortunately, the events. The Russian aggression, Russian gross violations of the human rights, and its numerous crimes against humanity committed in Ukraine, so that we do not have to take this rules-based international system for granted. Because of that, another conclusion is that we have to, if we really want to reach and to have at least relative stability in the world, we have to reform as soon as possible. We have to reform the United Nations as such, and the UN Security Council in particular, because it's just inadmissible that in the Security Council there is a country which commits gross violations and really carries out a genocidal policy against another states, and is involved in making a decision because of that. So the reform of UN system is very much needed, because what is happening now, it's also only it is limited to the providing of the humanitarian assistance, and it's not, of course, we appreciate it, but it's not sufficient enough, and the United Nations has to come back to its main purpose, why it was created back in 1945. And the main purpose of the United Nations is to maintain international peace and security. Another conclusion is that in order to stop atrocities, aggressions similar to Ukraine, there is a need of a strong international reactions, immediate strong international reactions, and appeasement of the aggressor. It is obvious that appeasement of the aggressor is not a solution. It doesn't have to be admitted, and only a strong position of the international community can lead to strong position, and unity of the international position can guarantee the durable, lasting, and sustainable peace. So let me stop here, and maybe I will make some other commitments afterwards.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ivan.
Thank you. Fully supporting the ambassador answer. We can say that, of course, sovereignty and territorial integrity cannot be negotiable, because if aggression against Ukraine is tolerated today, tomorrow another dictator can attack a different country, for example, in Europe or even in Latin America. And it's very important to remember that Russia is the first state since World War II to formally annex another country's territory. And normalizing now this would destroy what remains of the rules-based order. And that's why the system needs automatic consequences for aggressions that are not blocked by a Security Council veto. And about the second question about the position of the United States, of course, now, especially under President Trump, it has influenced the way some Latin American countries interpret the war. We remember, for example, at the beginning of the year, how some countries of Latin America changed their position and vote in other way during the UN voting regarding the resolution in UN, but it did not fully determine Latin American policy, which is rooted in strategic autonomy. And for the future, I think that's most important, that we should think of the US as an important partner, but not as the central filter for EU, Latin America, Ukraine relations. And it is really essential to de-Americanize the narrative and develop more direct cooperation between Ukraine, Europe, and Latin America, as well as with Ukraine as an EU candidate and hopefully in future as a member of EU. And building autonomous territorial dialogue reduces dependence on US framing and allows all three regions, three parties, to make decisions based on shared principles like sovereignty, territorial integrity, human rights, and rules-based order.
Thank you. Lila?
Yes, thank you, Sofía. Of course, I fully agree with what Ambassador Klymenko said about the reform, the very needed reform of the United Nations organization. But meanwhile, as it's not going to be an easy thing, because we know that permanent members in the Security Council are always vetoing any decision that can hurt their interests. Meanwhile, I think that we have maybe to put the stress on strengthening regional organizations that could assist the member that is attacked or aggressed. This is working on peace zones like the one we have in Latin America. And there's another thing that I'm always talking about is we cannot wait until the aggression comes to react. Because this aggression from the Russian Federation was long announced. For many years it was announced. And since the first declarations in the first years of President Putin's presidency, there were already references to the disaster of the Soviet Union disintegration. There was references to neighboring countries as being very close to Russia, insistence on the countries of the region to becoming members of the organizations led by Russia. So it was something that it was so visible, even in before Crimea's annexation. It was very perceptive that something was going to happen there. So why wait until the aggression is consumed? Why wait until Georgia, for instance, lost 2 of its provinces in 2008? And nobody said anything. Nobody did anything. There were some efforts, peace efforts, that didn't lead anywhere. Then the Minsk agreements. The Minsk agreements were coordinated by France, Germany, and Russia was a part of it, and Ukraine, but also the governments in the Donetsk and Lugansk republics, so-called republics. So it was not good. It was not going to lead anywhere. After the annexation of Crimea, it was evident for every one of us that it's not going to be the end of it. So why didn't the Western countries, European Union, United States, the G7, why didn't they act before the aggression, not after the aggression? That's something that we have to keep in mind, I think. Prevention. It's like when you're going to be sick, you have to prevent sickness, not act afterwards when you are already sick. And we are living now in a world that unfortunately is going to be a great powers competition between the United States and China and another country that is not a great power as them, but it feels it has the right to act as a great power, which is the Russian Federation. And so we are other actors that are coming into the scene with force, with strength, like India and Turkey and other countries. We should look at it very carefully and reinforce our associations with like-minded countries, with countries that have the same interest as we do, as our countries do, and try to reinforce our defense, our mechanisms, our preventive mechanisms. And of course, related to Mr. Trump administration, it's been a big shock to everybody in the international scene, because the first thing that he did was going against Panama and its Panama Channel, or announcing that it was going to annex Canada or Greenland. So, and now with this peace plan, which is very much resisted by everybody. I was at the Berlin Forum 2 weeks ago, and the only thing people were talking about was the peace plan. And everybody was considering that it's not going to lead anywhere because it was unacceptable and in its terms. It's going further than the main objectives that Russia voiced in the first place. It was giving Russia more than they asked for. So it was unacceptable for European Union, which was left aside of the conversations of the constructing of the building of the plan. It was unacceptable for Ukraine, which was also left aside. And so now we are seeing that it's leading nowhere. So that will be my feeling. Join together in the regions and strengthen the regions and defend the region, and then prevent aggressions before they happen.
Thank you, Lila. Bartolomé?
Thank you. So let me respond to two questions regarding the lessons for the international security system and the consequences of the changes in the US policy. I'm happy about what Lila Roldán said about talking from the very beginning of his intention, because I think this is one of the essence of the problem. That many people doubted about this would be a reality, but he was saying what he was intending. And I'm from the country that for years has been warning about the danger of rising revisionism in Russia. And instead of being heard, Poland was rather qualified in Western Europe, for example, as a Russophobic country. So before Georgia, there was a famous visit led by the Polish president, who was warning about, like, first was Georgia, next would be Ukraine, and then Baltic states, and maybe after that Poland. So that is really something that was visionary in pessimistic terms. The problem, I'm not an expert on Russia, on European affairs, but I understand that one of the problems was the illusion in the West Europe that close, strong business ties with Russia would make Russia a normal country. One of the problems that was criticized in Poland was, for example, the project of Nord Stream by Germany, that was explained by Germany as something normal, but for Poland it was the way to give Russia energy as a weapon, and that turned into reality. And the repeating reaction in Poland to the Russia full-scale invasion 2022 was, we told you so, and you never heard us. And that doesn't, even now it hasn't changed attitudes in Western Europe, because there are still politicians that are fear about consequences, are not convinced to the changes, or just still see that the business opportunities are more important than thinking about a more realistic vision of Russia. There is a change, because Poland had the first semester of this year with its presidency of European Union, Council of European Union, and security became one of the top topic of the cooperation and of the vision in European Union. But there are still many problems. One, for example, is attaching rationality, which is present, for example, United States, Western Europe, to the understanding of Russia. This is not the same. And that's one of the problems in understanding the way how Putin behaves. And now, regarding the current state, I think what Trump is doing with Russia is repeating the steps that were present in much part of Europe, that better business ties with Russia will help to stabilize that country and will be better than defeating that country. And that approach has clearly primacy in this new policy realized by Trump administration. I think what is especially dangerous is the return in the United States to the logic of spheres of influence, what I mentioned in my speech, but also the conviction that this administration knows how to deal with Russia. The fact is that they are played out by Russia easily because these basically are amateurs, or they don't just see their low knowledge how to deal with Russia. I wonder what will be the change with the approach from President Milei, because now with the help from United States before the midterm parliamentary election, I think there's more dependence between Milei on Trump. So possibly if Trump administration would expect Argentina to follow some steps United States impose, maybe it will be more difficult. There will be less flexibility for Milei's government to work towards greater engagement for Ukraine. So this challenge is really great, and I don't have a response. What would be a solution for this kind of international crisis? If it's now it's much more complex to deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bartolomew. To close, we have the ambassador of Ukraine and Argentina, Ambassador Klymenko. You wanted to share some final words with us?
Gracias. Thank you very much. Just for, I was inspired by some comments, but thank you very much for this opportunity. Very briefly, but actually, I think it would be pertinent to share with you. Let me come back to the lessons learned. You know, it's I agree with Ambassador Lila Roldán Vázquez about the importance of the prevention. I agree about that, but in order to have a viable prevention, we need an effective working mechanisms which would allow to ensure the prevention. And I think that this situation, the war of aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine and its consequences, and I think, you know, it's the consequences are not regional, they are global. Now all the regions of the world feel these consequences of Russian aggressive disruptive actions. So I think for prevention, and I fully agree that prevention is needed. Actually, it's essential. But we need viable universal organizations, which is first of all the United Nations, but of course regional ones is very important as well, and they can contribute a lot to ensure the peaceful situation on the ground. Actually, one other point which is very important is justice. As this Russian war of aggression shows, we have to. I speak not only about Ukraine and not only all countries in the world, but I speak more broadly about all the international community. We have to ensure justice, not only for the victims of the Russian aggression against Ukraine. As many of you know, there are now the number of the crimes of aggression and crimes against humanity committed by the Russian Federation in Ukraine are now, and I'm speaking about documented cases, around 200,000 crimes committed by the Russian Federation. You know, so that's why to ensure justice is so important for the international community, both for the victims of the crimes, but also for the international community, in not to let other dictators, and Putin as well, and other dictators inspired by the Russian dictator, the new dictators, not to let them thinking that they can do whatever they want. The punishment have to be inevitable for those who violate the international law, the international humanitarian law. And also would like to add something on my part about the United States engagement in putting an end to the Russian war against Ukraine. We appreciate very much the commitment of the US current administration to put an end to the war and to establish peace in Ukraine. But we are trying to be crystal clear in our context with our American partners, as well as in our communication with our European colleagues, which are very, very supported in our endeavors to reach peace, that we don't need an abstract peace, which will be violated tomorrow. But the most important is to have a reliable peace, to have a long-lasting peace, to have a just peace. And we do our best together with our partners, working hard to elaborate a viable mechanism which will allow to have a long-lasting peace in Ukraine, not being violated tomorrow by the Russian Federation. We know that by our own tragic experience that Russia is able to violate agreements easily. So we are working hard, and among other things, we stress upon the importance of the real guarantees to Ukraine from the countries which can really contribute to it, in particular on the part of the United States, as well as others which can assume this important responsibility. And summing up, one comment that as this Russian war of aggression and Russian growing expansionism and revanchism shows that it's not the Russian war against Ukraine is not a regional matter. It's not a regional matter, and now it shows that it concerns everybody. Some of the speakers spoke about the increased Russian disruptive activities here in Latin America and more broadly in the global south. So really, I speak about Russia. Yes, they do what they can in order to disrupt or even to put an end to the rules-based order we have, and to impose the system which we had in the end of the 19th century, in the first part of the 20th century. So that's why it's so important that each democratic countries, each country committed to democracy and to the supremacy of law is actively engaged to ensure long-lasting peace in Ukraine, and in order to bring back the respect to the international law as such. I thank you. Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Klymenko. Thank you to all our speakers today, Lila, Ivan, Bartolomeus, Victoria, Sergiy, for sharing their knowledge, their experience, their insights. On behalf of Universidad Austral and our partners, the Ukrainian Prism and Liv Polytechnical National University, thank you all for taking the time to join this seminar on Ukraine, Latin America, and the European Union, and the intersection of geopolitics and geoeconomics. I think we learned a lot, we thought a lot, and we hope we have a great rest of the day, and we invite you to stay connected and working together on these critical issues. Thank you. Muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody. It was a
Gracias.
pleasure seeing you.
See you.
Bye.
Mucho
Дякую.
gusto.
Thank you.
Дякую.
Gracias, Sofía. Sí.
Gracias a todos. Muchas gracias, Pamela. Ya podemos cerrar el Zoom. Muy buenas tardes.